Howdy, everyone. Today we're going to be covering how to take your 2D designs and translate them into 3D. But first, we're going to look at the actual class that's set up. So if you're doing this through the original set of lessons, this is for you. If you're looking back at the videos later on, don't need to worry about it. You can skip forward, like, it's not very long. But basically, in your side menu, you should now be able to see classes. You click on classes, there's Onshape summer classes, and then this is where the assignment is. And if you click here, you should be able to, um, yeah, so just, it'll say start assignment, not restart, but start the assignment here. And this is how you will get into any of the assignments that are done for practice so that then I can review them. Okay, now we're gonna go back to uh, the actual lesson. I already have a file from when I was going over some of the features, but I'm not sure exactly what's in it right now. So we're just gonna go into a new file. And so when you're in a new part studio, it starts outside of the sketch. But if you look all across the top of here, there's a lot of features to cover. So some of these I'm not going to cover yet. So there's feature scripts, sheet metal, and framing. Those I'm going to leave off, and then I'll cover most of the stuff in this area, but not all of it. But we will cover the major tools for actually making your 3D files. So as always, you need to start with a sketch. So make a new sketch, and let's just start with a rectangle. And now each of these tools generally has a few options. So extrude, the one you're going to use most is solid. This is just making a new part. So we can do a solid extrude. Then the next is a surface extrude, which you actually have to select a sketch. So I'll show the sketch in the back. And what it does is it takes the edges of the sketch and makes a surface based off of it. So this is just, it's perfectly flat, and you can use it for some of the other features. And then you can also merge it with other surfaces. You can't merge it with the 3D part. And then there's a thin, which just makes the part with a certain thickness. And it can either go in or out, and it can have two thicknesses as well. And with all of these features, you can either make it a new part. So as you can see, these are now two separate parts. You can see in the side menu here. You can add it together. So now it's one part. We'll go back at this again. You can do a remove, and in this case, it has to go into another part. So if you look this remove, what it does is it actually gets rid of the other part. And then if you quick check, you can see it's been removed. And then the final one is intersect, which is just all of the stuff that's the same. So if I do like two thicknesses, you can see that, like if I was doing a new, it'd be this full size. If I was doing add, it'd also be this full size, just joined together. But with an intersect, it's only the part that's both of them together. So now we're gonna close this and then go over a few specifics with each extrude. So we'll we'll leave this one here, and I like to, once I have my base part, hide the other parts because they just annoy me. But I'm gonna make a new sketch here, and then using some of the sketch features we learned about, I'm gonna make a rectangle that's centered in here. And I also could have done this with an offset if I wanted to have it be like perfectly centered and like the same thickness all around, but I'm not gonna do that. So this is how I generally make them. And now If we look at extrude, it's pretty much the same features in all of them. There's some stuff I won't really cover in depth just because there's so much to go over, but we'll select what we want to extrude. Then there's these extrude types. So up to next extrudes it up to whatever the next object is. So if I quickly like scroll or wait, actually show y'all starting offset and stuff like that. So for a solid extrude, there's a few types for the extrude. So there's blind, which is just you enter a value, up to face, which is where you select a part, like a face, and it'll go to there. Up to part, which is it'll go to that part. As you can see, it goes to that part there. Vertex, you just select a point, and then through all just goes through everything. This is mainly used if you're doing a remove. And then there's extrude direction, which is where you just specify like the direction of the extrude. Typically, it's just normal to the face, but if you had like an angle you want to do, you could do that. Starting offset, which you can either select a point to start as the offset or do blind, which is just a value. Symmetric, which just makes the extrude go both ways. And then there is also draft, which adds an angle, either angling in or out. And then if you don't have symmetric on, you can do a second in position, which just allows you to extrude to a different part. Same options as the other one. But for now, we're going to make this new part. And then I'm just going to show the same thing again. So now we can show how you can do the extrude up to next. It'll go to this part. Up to face. You have to choose a face that's planar. So like this top face doesn't work, but this face does. So you can see it goes up to whatever face it is, up to part. It'll go to that part, or I can make it go to this part. And then vertex. Again, you select vertex and it goes there. This is nice if it's something that's not in the same plane that you want to extrude it to, and then through all to go through this, which is mainly again used for remove. And then whenever you're adding stuff, there's also, well, add, remove, or intersect. There's the merge. So you can either select what parts to merge it with, or you can set it as merge with all. So that's the extrude tool. And next up, we're going to go on to the revolve tool. It has the same options for surface and thin, which I'm not really going to cover those for every single part because it's basically the same thing. Same with add, remove, and intersect. But main thing with revolve is, of course, you're revolving. The axis doesn't have to be on the square. So if I wanted to have an axis that was out here, it doesn't even have to be parallel with it. Can edit this, go back, and then like that. And then you can also select how far to go, make it go in both directions the same amount, or have two direction it goes. And then for surface, it's same thing as the first surface, same information, and then thin, it's the same. Surface and thin will be the same for all of these, so not really a whole lot of point covering every time. And let's see, next we have sweep. So this one actually it's really good to demonstrate with this part because I can create a sketch here and let's say I wanted to put like a circle. Now what sweep does is you have this like face and it moves it along a path. And then there's options how you want to work with the like profile orientation, profile faces, and sometimes they can cause errors if like the profile is going to result in bad geometry. And generally, you don't have to lock it, but with doing more advanced stuff, it's nice to experiment with trying adding it on as a lock. And again, if you have any issues you run into with specific stuff, feel free to just ask. So let's clear all this out. Let's make a new part studio. And here, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. I'm going to introduce a plane. So what the plane does is there's a lot of choices how you make it, but in general for all of them, you just select some sort of geometry to define where the plane will be, and then you get a new plane. So for this, I'm going to do a sketch up bottom here, and I'll do a sketch on this plane I made up here, which you'll see why in just a second. So here, I now have my two faces that I want to connect together, and I can do a loft. And what it'll do is we'll blend the two geometries together along the length. So even going from like this hexagon to a circle, it works. You can also select multiple faces inside the loft, and you can loft with more than just two. So for instance, if I go back here, let's make another plane here, do a sketch on this plane, and this time we'll make it a square. It also doesn't even have to be centered. Like I can make it out here. And it will always do its best to work. As you can see now, it does some weird curving and stuff, but it matches each plane. And then this is where you can use uh, like start and end profiles to modify it. And a lot of this is just playing around with it and actually using it in CAD. And another thing is you can add a path. So I will just go back and make a sketch for the path. So let's see. Like if I just do a spline through here, now I can edit this, add the path in, and oh, I didn't add the third one. But you can see like the number of sections. You can edit and it will path along. And this just helps you be able to control how uh, like how the actual thing goes. And then guides are similar. I typically use guides if I want to keep it like from twisting. So instead of a spline, I do something like just a vertical line. Now edit it. There, uncheck path, do a guide. And sometimes it won't let you do it. If I remove the third one, oh, my bad. I got them confused. The path doesn't have to intersect. I'm pretty sure the guides do. So this should let me do the guides. Where is it? There. Yeah, so it'll guide this one specific part, and then you can add more guides in other places to better constrain the geometry. So that's how you do a loft, and you can get a lot of funky features like this. In like robotics and stuff, I'd mainly use it if I'm connecting parts together and want to do it smoothly. Uh, but in general, they aren't the most useful part. Next up, we have or well, yeah, and you can also do surface and thin for lofts. Next up, we have thicken, and this just lets you thicken a face. And basically, it's kind of like extruding outwards, but it does it a bit better. And then you can choose the thickness. You can choose if you want to do it's like a mid plane. That's just like where it starts for thickening it. Sorry, there's a bit of technical difficulties with the recording software, but I will pick up where it left off. I was about to get into enclose, so well, let's just go through and clear this out. But what enclose is used for is if you have like a combination of sketches and surfaces, stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is like make the sketch, extrude. It can even be like faces of a part, but you can't mix surfaces and the faces together. So I just select all of these. This forms a little surface. And then I have this sketch plane here that helps enclose it. But now I also need a sketch plane here. So I'm going to use the plane tool. And then let's see, 3-point. I could have done with pretty much any of the plane tools, but this one's probably the nicest to use. So now you select all of the bounding things, and they don't even have to be just this section, but when you click check, now we have a solid part that's like the enclosure of what was being done. So if you like cat out a mold for something before the part for some reason, what you can do is actually you can just use the enclose tool in order to actually get what the part would look like. Next up, uh, well, there's a fillet, which is just makes like a circular cutout. There's different ways to measure it, and then uh, like how you make the fillet. But in general, you're just going to use distance. You can also make it asymmetric, do partial fillet, stuff like that. So there's a lot of variability in it. But those are just used around corners, and those are typically like with 3D printing, those would be used if it's like this is the print bed right here, the top plane, then this is where you use the fillet. And if you want to do something like this, you'd use a chamfer, which is very similar to the fillet. It's a flat instead of like a curve. And if you like have to make a fillet, like you saw, you use the fillets for the sketch fillets. It's pretty much just a circle, and you cut off the excess. So you make a circle tangent to 2 lines. Next up, we have the draft, which is select a neutral plane, select what you want to draft, and then you can uh, just edit. It's like this is the neutral plane, and then it's now drafting this part out at an angle from that plane, well, out or in, and then you can choose to reapply fillets, then parting line, full directions like parting edges. Oh, similar thing, it's just pulling from the edge and using the line. So I have draft. There's also body draft, but I don't really use that one, and it's kind of just an annoyance. So we're just gonna skip over that. Using the normal draft tool, drafting with your extrudes gets the same effects, and it's a lot more present. I'm gonna skip rib real quickly to go over shell, because we already have this part here. So what the shell will do is you can either select a face, then I'll choose the part and it can hollow it out. You can even select multiple. make like these little cutouts, or you can just make it totally hollow. Select this part, and then we, for instance, make it transparent. You can see it's hollow inside. Then we will go New Part Studio. Made a lot of them, but what rib does is makes a rib for like a design. If you've ever done like supports or something, you might know what a rib is. It really is just to support the inside of a corner. So if we make our corner piece real quickly, yeah, symmetric. Now we want to bring back our sketch, and we'll do a rib here, and then it just detected the part, but so you can see it just kind of fills in to that part, and you can also draft it, which is fun. So if you do like 15 degrees, you can see how it angles out. Just additional support on those inside corners. Then hole adds a hole in your part. I would, unless you have a very specific use case, I would highly advise just doing it manually. It's not that much of an issue. And like, these are great if you're gonna like CNC something out of metal and like drill and tap into it, and you need the very specifics of, oh, this is what this will end up as. Okay, you can see like right here, it'll have like the tip depth of the drill. You can like say how much is actually cut. As you can see, it's putting this hole in a really weird place, which start playing. You can fix it sometimes. But in general, I just CAD my own holes. Typically, when I'm doing the sketch, it saves time and you don't have to deal with this. Then there's also external thread, which I can make a cylinder real quickly to show you all that. But this is another tool that isn't useful. Like, not just it's like less efficient, it literally is not useful because Onshape does threads as cosmetic threads because, well, any standard thread you aren't going to be able to 3D print, and it doesn't really matter if you have it in your CAD. So this just saves a lot of processing power, but you can indicate something is threaded. If you want to have 3D printed threads, which would be like for 3D printed nut and bolt, you have to CAD your own threads, which probably won't need to do. I might cover it later on just as like a good practice exercise, but it's really not that useful unless you have an application specific for it. So in robotics, we aren't going to use CADed or well 3D printed threads. If you're doing like a 3D printed project, you might. But for us, this feature does literally nothing because like you can see this threaded area, but these threads are just a cosmetic, which looks cool, but doesn't help us. So there's a few more tools that I'll cover. So there's linear pattern, which is very similar to the linear pattern we did in sketches, except for now it's with parts, or you can do it with features and faces. So for part pattern, same thing, you have options. You can make it centered, you can add a second direction, which will make it like a 2 by, I think, oh, there's only one instance there, 2. You can also skip instances, which I don't really use that. I believe that's just with like this thing as opposed to the demo. And you can make it centered. this is pretty straightforward. Now, what is a little bit less straightforward is the feature pattern. So we're going to switch to a feature pattern, and let's just look at this extrude through 2. Now I make a direction, and you actually have to do reapply, but we'll just flip it down. So this is what you would do to actually like duplicate a feature or some effect you did. So it can be extrude, like a cut, really any of the effects you have up there. Mainly it'll work best with like an extrude, revolve, and you can also make the parts separately and then do a like normal part pattern, and after you do the normal part pattern, you're able to just do a boolean to join them together. But this is another way. I've used it a few times, but not a ton. And then I'm sure in some sort of practice example we're doing, I'll show how it's used a little bit better than this because it's just a random example document. Then there's also the face pattern, which it's the same thing as the other ones, but with a face. And again, I don't use this one. And I'm not sure what the error on it is, but again, unless you're working with something that you like really want to enclose, it's generally better to do physical patterns as opposed to working with faces, in my experience. And this is very specific to robotics, so I can't say for other stuff, but that's why some of these features I'm like, huh, I've never used this before, but let's see. Okay, so next up we have the circular pattern, and similar to the revolve, but with entities. So we're gonna select this little cylinder and circular revolve it around this axis right here. And yes, it does right now look like it's just a square, but I promise to see it's a circle. You can choose equal spacing, uh, which is just if this number is like how much each space is, or if it's all equally spaced within this distance. You can center the parts on it, which this doesn't really do anything for this specific one. And then skip instances. This is where like you select which instances you don't want to do. Then same thing, you can do a feature pattern or a face pattern. I use part and feature patterns. I don't use face patterns like literally ever, but this just makes a little 3D spot. And now the next tool we have is the mirror tool. So you select the entities or the features or the faces you want to mirror, and then you select a mirror plane, just reflects them across the plane. What the Boolean does is there's 3 options. There's union, subtract, and intersect. You can also keep the tools. Fairly obvious, but union joins them together. Subtract will take these tools and remove from a target. So you can see they have it cut off there. You can also do an offset, and then you can choose to keep the tools. And intersect just finds the intersection between the 2 parts. So same as other Boolean operations, just now this time it's specific to this. So now I'm going to skip a bit ahead to delete part because it's getting a little bit cluttered. Delete part, you just delete parts. So I can select all of these and delete them. Now split, you choose a part or surface and curves, and then you can choose how to split it, and it'll just separate them out into multiple parts. This is nice if like I catted this part at the top and I wanted to do a pattern with it, but feature pattern was being annoying. I could split it off and then do a uh, like either circular, some sort of pattern. I didn't cover curve pattern. I'll do that in just a second. But as you can see, this is the transform, which there's a lot of options, and uh, pretty much what it does is moves the part. And this is really the only way you can move parts in Onshape in the part studios. But there's all these options for doing it. The main ones are really like translate by a line if you want to move it a certain way and a certain distance. Translate by distance, very similar. Translate by XYZ, which is where you just kind of move it. Rotate, scale, or like making a copy. You can also do mate connectors, but I don't really use that one a ton. Again, I also try to avoid using transforms in my CAD because generally means I went wrong somewhere. You can also choose to copy a part, which will make a new part as opposed to just moving this. And then there's wrap, which will kind of project a sketch onto a 3D surface. But first, we're gonna do. Oh, that's annoying. That's also why you use the delete part, because sometimes if you try to do it the other way, it just deletes all of like the stuff just goes red, which is never a good thing. But let's just. I'll just revolve this around here. There. Just make this little area right here. Looks nice. Yeah, I'll be able to do wrap on there. But we'll create another sketch. And what a curve pattern does, this is the one I missed a bit earlier, but it's the same thing as linear or like circular. The only difference is it's moving it along the curve. It's like this, which you probably wouldn't just want an arbitrary curve, but like if you were patterning holes along like an edge, something like that, this is a really nice part to have, or like feature to have. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sketch right here. This is just in the center, but should be okay. Now, if I just put howdy in the text box, and now let's see, let's pin that there, and then move it to where it will fit on. Now, if we go back to where I left off and do a wrap, we can do that face and wrap it onto this target. And let's see. Where's it? Oh, yes, right here. So it's currently on this side, but you can move it around. And yeah, if you have it on like the outside of the target, it will generally wrap to like the front face as opposed to going to the back. But if there are issues with it, you can just spin it around and now it's mirrored. But yeah, it's just how the wrap works. So generally have it on the outside. And then there's stuff like anchor points, but I don't have points on the actual outside of this plane, so can't really do anything. And then trim to target's basically like it cuts it if it's going to be too big. You can also do a solid wrap, specify a thickness. So what this does is it just like physically puts it on there so it embosses it. This is nice if you're doing like lettering on a curved surface. So now it says howdy, but backwards. And then this is where it's really nice that you have the feature to like flip the text. So now if I finish that up, it'll say howdy the correct way. And then decal, I'm not going to actually upload an image, but it's the same thing as this, except for just projecting a image onto that circle. Then I showed delete part. Modify fillet, what that does is it, well, modifies a fillet. Kind of obvious. We'll make another part studio and demonstrate that one. So go here, make this little L shape. And then add our fillet there. And now if we modify fillet, you can just kind of change the radius. So if I want it to be really big fillet and change radius, or you can remove it altogether. But it's pretty useful if you're doing CAD on like later down the line. But in general, I just go back and edit the fillet, then delete face. It'll turn this thing into a surface, but it just kind of gets rid of a face. And that's how you can go from a solid part to a mesh, full like surface mesh. Then move face, similar thing, it just moves the face in or outwards. Then there's multiple types for the face move, like that. Or you can even rotate it. And let's choose this axis. So lots of ways to go and edit the part later on. Then next up, replace face. And this would be, let's see, we can make like a sketch here. Then now use the pierce tool to connect it there. And then I can faces to replace, face with this, and it'll just replace. You can also just do that one. There's a few options for how you do it, but it's pretty simple. So I just like moved it up. Then next up, I'm going to cover some of these, not all of them, because as you can see, there's quite a few, and this video is already probably going to be fairly long. But there's offset surface, which is you just make a surface offset. Plane, which I showed you. There's offset, which is you take a plane and it just offsets it. Plane point, so it's pretty much just you get the plane and you get like a point for where you want that new plane to be. Line angle, you select a line and then choose the angle for your plane to be at. Point normal, have a point, and then the normal vector for the plane. 3-point, you select 3 points to be in the plane. So I could go like this, and this, and I'll make the plane with 3 points. Midplane, we'll take 2 other planes and put a plane right in the middle. Curve point, you have a curve, well, and then you put your point, and it'll make a plane based on that, which is just like the direction the curve is going at that point. And then tangent is you make a plane tangent to something. So this one's kind of goofy, but like if I add a like cylinder, I can make a tangent to the cylinder. So those are the ways you make a plane. Sorry, wrong tab. I'm gonna skip the surfaces stuff. Um, let's see. I'll probably go through the curves at a later point, or maybe just use some of them in actual CAD. But next up, this one, fairly important, is a mate connector. So you select where you want the mate connector to be, and you can also select which part owns it, which is very nice because if you want to be able to like mate this surface right here relative to this part, I can put a mate connector at the center of the top of this part, but then link it up to the surface instead. There's options to realign it, move it, and you can make it between two entities instead of just on one, so it's kind of like a mid origin or like midpoint. So that mate connector is very useful. You can add variables to your part studio, which I'll cover later with parametric design. I generally use the configuration studio instead of variables. They do the same thing, it's just the configuration so you can edit in other documents. And last thing is like a composite part, which is just like multiple parts together. And like you can also like add a tag to an entity. Oh, and select a single sketch feature. Like, oh, there. It's working now. But that's not really useful for CAD. It's more of like documentation and stuff, which we're probably not going to do in the actual Onshape document itself. So just to recap on a few of the things that I did not cover, uh, I didn't go over a lot of stuff with surfaces in this tab right here. Most of it won't use very often. Uh, then I didn't go over framing and didn't go over sheet metal. If you do want to look in and test those out, feel free to. You're welcome to ask me questions about them. Just gonna be too long a video otherwise. And if you see, it'll look like this for y'all. But I didn't go over custom features yet. I definitely will go over those, and I will like find out a few that'll be really good and useful and show you all those. But just a brief overview of all of these tools for taking 2D designs and making them 3D, and just get some practice with those. And then the next step will be going from this part into our actual assemblies, which is where we put everything together. And we have a lot more fun tools to go over. And if you aren't in like the Onshape classroom, just a note, you won't see these. These are for simulations, which I'll go over eventually. You also won't see this with me, I don't think. But that's all for today, and good luck and make sure to get some practice in.